Welcome to the Preventing Distracted Driving webinar. My name is Larissa, and I'll be your operator for today's call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Later, we'll conduct a question-and-answer session. Please note this conference is being recorded, and I'd like to turn the call over to Wayne Kirkland. Sir, you may begin.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Wayne Kirkland, and I'm the Risk Control Director here at CNA. And I've got the privilege to be involved with the ASCC Safety and Risk Management Council. I've been in the risk control specialty for some 28 years, working with contractors in various trades and as well as some other industries. So thank you for your time today to learn more about this all-important issue to our business, and that's preventing distracted driving. You know, about 100 people die each day in traffic accidents in the country, and this has been going on for about the last 40 years. And so now, according to the Auto Alliance, between 70 and 90% of those crashes are caused by human error. So this is a big deal, and I hope you find the time spent today to be worthwhile. I'll take a moment to pause here with our disclaimer. With any group presentation, our legal partners always appreciate it when we share this. I'll just add that we do believe our material here to be reliable, and it's really up to you as to how or even if you apply that. So with that, we'll get started. So at the end of the program here, you're hopefully going to understand how a driver doing something else while driving can contribute to having an accident. And we're going to highlight this word cognitive as we go along, a very, very important term. We hope to give you some tools to help control these distractions, and I hope that you'll understand why you need a policy in place to keep employees from talking on their cell phones while driving on behalf of the company. So with that, let's get started. Maybe level set here on what kind of distractions that we're talking about. And you see the list here, both inside and outside the vehicle, we have distractions and causes by the driver, by others, by events. You know, people who are studying distractions tell us that when you break it down, there are really three major types of distractions. First of all, visual, which obviously is taking our eyes off the road. Manual or mechanical, so our hands are off the wheel. And cognitive, and that simply our mind is off the driving task. And the thing is, we don't know when we have this cognitive type of distraction. I have a PhD friend of mine. He's brilliant, and he just swears that he's not distracted when he's using a cell phone and driving. And we're going to find out as we go along here that is simply not the case. So let's talk about some of these common distractions, and I would consider them temptations to rubberneck. Looking at outside the vehicle, passing an accident, emergency vehicles on the road, maybe signs and billboards. You could probably name some other outside distractions. And the question is, so what can your company do to control those outside distractions? Quite frankly, not much. And so what we quite simply need to do is remind those drivers that we employ in our driver safety meetings, for example, they've got to keep their eyes on the road, and they shouldn't focus on anything other than driving for any length of time. Well, what about inside the vehicle distractions? I think we'd all agree that these are common in-vehicle or in-cab distractions. These have been around a long time, and you might have some others in mind. I was thinking about, lighting a cigarette as another example. But one major frequent distraction is not on this list, and that is cell phones, talking on the cell phone while driving. And we're going to get into great detail on that here in a bit. It's a very unique exposure for our companies out there. But before we talk about cell phones, I want to talk a little bit more about what we can do to control these other distractions inside the vehicle. So eating and drinking. Drivers have got to be instructed to take lunch or dinner time outside the vehicle. And it's going to reduce distractions, but also it's going to give that driver time to rest. It's going to allow their eyes and their body time to recover from being in that driver's seat for any period of time. Not eating in the vehicle can reduce the amount of trash. I would say that the trash question or issue actually provides another hazard if you're in a vehicle. I can't tell you how many times I've seen, cans or bottles that roll under the brake pedal and can prevent the vehicle from stopping. And so, again, paper blowing around the vehicle, that's another distraction potentially. Reading, paperwork, using electronic equipment. Our drivers have got to understand that paperwork and sending messages to the office just cannot be done unless the vehicle is safely parked. Most electronic equipment can be placed where the driver cannot reach it while they're in the driver's seat, or it can be wired so that the driver can't send a message when the vehicle is moving. I personally believe technology advances are going to be ultimately really the most significant game changer that we're going to see in the future to reduce these distractions. Very, very significant in the future. Some more about inside the vehicle distractions, adjusting the radio. Main problem there is when drivers take their eyes off the road. Again, that's one of those big three types of distractions or categories. But for any period of time, checking the radio, looking for a CD, picking up the CD off the floor, these are distractions. Cargo shifting and falling, that's a big one. The National Highway Safety Administration, they studied this cargo shifting and falling back in 2006, and I'll tell you what they found is a driver is actually 9 times more likely to have a crash or nearly have a crash when they reach for a falling object. So very significant factor. And we would tell you, all cargo needs to be secured to prevent it from shifting while the vehicle is moving. And actually, as far as the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations are concerned, for commercial vehicles, that's actually a requirement. So it's good business practice. Have a standard cargo securement policy or practice for anything that your vehicle is carrying. Even in cars, I've done this. Most of us have. Put something in the passenger seat beside us, and when we hit the brake hard, what'd you do? Well, I know I'm tempted to try to stop with my right hand, taking it off the steering wheel and looking over at that object, and that split second could be truly fatal. And lastly, there with regard to pets in our personal cars, we're tempted to look at a pet walking around. That's a distraction. Bottom line is they really need to be secured in the vehicle. I mentioned electronic equipment a moment ago. You may have some of this equipment in your company vehicles, like the GPS systems. If your employees have a BlackBerry or an iPhone, they can do just about any of these activities while they're driving, can't they? That's certainly in today's technology age, we've got that capability. The question is for everybody, do you have a company policy not to use the company BlackBerry or the iPhone or other mobile communications equipment while driving? So let's talk more about cell phones. How's a cell phone help our business? One of the studies that's been done estimated about $25 billion of benefit to business each year from use of cell phone. I remember when the phones first came out, they were car phones, mounted hardwired in the cars, right? And they were built for use only when in the car. And then later on, we had the bag phones that came along, right? And the bottom line is these were designed for more productivity, and that's what we found. But now we know that there are serious consequences from using a cell phone. These numbers here should really grab your attention. For example, more than 1 in 4 accidents are the result of someone being on their cell phone or texting while driving. Almost 6,000 people died in 2008 alone because someone was on their phone or texting or distracted while driving. And this number, $43 billion, that's with a B, $43 billion costs are associated with cell phone accidents. So that $25 billion benefit we talked about now has turned into a loss, and that's from a Harvard study. There are actually over 20 studies out there that show slower reaction times when driving and using a cell phone. Several studies have shown, including this University of Utah study, that this is, when you talk on the cell phone while you're driving, it's a slower reaction time that is the same as driving intoxicated with a blood alcohol level of 0.08%, which I think in many states is legally drunk. It's the same reaction time as being drunk. Why is that? Well, let's look at the science here. Using a cell phone requires, the big word, parietal lobe and the occipital lobe from your biology, if you remember that. Both of those are associated with driving. The parietal lobe is associated with navigation and spatial processing while driving. And the occipital lobe, it processes visual information. One study that I read, and this actually is available through the National Safety Council, there's a 37% reduction in brain activity if you're on your cell phone and driving. And that's that cognitive issue that we're talking about. So this idea of truly multitasking, it just cannot happen. Our brain has got to choose one task over the other. And when we're talking on the cell phone, it is going to choose the cell phone. Well, what about hands-free? I often get asked that question. And there are at least 25 studies out there that say there is no difference in reaction time between handheld and hands-free. In a few minutes, I'll talk about the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and they put a ban on using handheld cell phones while driving commercial motor vehicles. I'll also point out, going forward here, how many states have banned using handheld phones while driving. Quite honestly, I can't explain to you why the bans have not included all cell phone use, but that is the case. Okay, this idea of inattention blindness. Have you ever been driving and found yourself someplace on the road where you weren't supposed to be, or you couldn't remember driving the last several miles? I know I have in years gone by. I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, do you think you were driving safely? And I think for me personally, the answer clearly is no. So this inattention blindness, again, it's directly related to cognitive behavior. When we're on the cell, we may not realize that we just blew through a stop sign. We may not remember ever even seeing that stop sign. I probably didn't because of this inattention blindness. I've been asked, isn't it just as distracting to have a conversation with a passenger in the front seat? That's come up. And there actually are some studies that show that driving is actually improved when an adult driver an adult passenger is in the front seat. For example, you can imagine a passenger might jump back in their seat or grab the dash if they see something dangerous happen in front of the vehicle, or they may tell the driver, look out or slow down, that type of thing. So, a passenger can actually help a person improve their driving by being a second set of eyes on the road, and I've certainly found that to be true personally. I included this slide here just to show that this is not new in terms of this debate over the dangers of using a cell phone while driving. And we've been talking about this for over 15 years looking at this, and some interesting statistics that we have found. For example, a driver's age doesn't appear to impact cell phone accident rates until you get to the very young drivers, those that haven't completed high school yet. And for some reason, the rate of having an accident remains high even up to 15 minutes after a person gets off their cell phone. Now, my thought on that is, my personal thought is that we're probably still focused on what we just talked about rather than focusing on driving. One element that's really changed the game is the frequency of cell phone use, and it's really dramatically increased the risk factors. For example, 19% of drivers say that they text while driving, and personally, I think that number is low. But that's what some of the surveys say. There are two studies actually available through the National Safety Council about texting and driving, and what they're telling us is somewhere between 8 and 23 times more likely to crash if you're texting and driving. Pretty significant. One of the studies said 8 times, the other one said 23 times more likely. So that information is still a bit green, but that's what we're seeing. Does hands-free work? I heard on the radio this morning driving in downtown about a new AAA-sponsored study, and I think it may be the same study that was just published back in April by Texas A&M Transportation Institute. What they did, they studied voice-to-text applications that are out there available on these smartphones, and I got to tell you, they found no safety benefit whatsoever. It's essentially the same as manually texting, and one thing that they did find is reaction time. It is double that for what it would be for drivers that are not texting. So this idea of voice-to-texting, it is not holding up as a safety feature. Okay, so what's happening with legislation? You can see there are many states that apply their ban on handheld phones and texting to all drivers. In certainly in 10 states, and then 35 states have banned texting. So that it's a trend that we're seeing. That's a good thing. Some states have different bans for newer drivers or drivers with special vehicles, like, for example, school buses. What about enforcement? Cell phone laws typically are the primary enforcement in most states with a ban. So what that means is if you're a motorist, you can be ticketed for using handheld cell phone while driving without any other traffic events taking place. So it is a primary enforcement issue. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about commercial motor vehicles. So in January of last year, the FMCSA banned handheld cell phone use while driving a commercial motor vehicle. And to level set that, in Rule 390.5, they're defining commercial motor vehicles, and that means any self-propelled or towed motor vehicle used on a highway in interstate commerce to transport passengers or property when the vehicle A has a gross vehicle weight rating or gross combination weight rating of 10,001 pounds or more, or B, if it's designed to use or used to transport more than 8 passengers, including the driver, for compensation, or if it's designed or used to transport more than 15 passengers, including the driver, and it's not used to transport passenger for compensation. And then lastly there, if it's used in transporting hazardous materials that require placarding. So that's our definition. And specifically on paragraph 392.82 on using handheld mobile telephone, the definition: for the purpose of this section only, driving means operating a commercial motor vehicle on a highway, including while temporarily stopped because of a traffic control device or other momentary delays. And what I would say as a side note there is driving does not include operating a commercial motor vehicle when the driver has moved the vehicle off to the side or off of a highway and is stopped in a location where the vehicle can safely remain stationary. So if they pull over and they're stopped in a safe place, then that is not considered driving and using a handheld cell phone. Drivers are allowed to use push-to-talk equipment under these conditions here. You know, the push-to-talk mobile phone has got to be mounted near the driver, allowing the driver to communicate without reaching for or dialing or holding the cell phone while driving. What about penalties? You know, violations of the handheld cell phone ban can result in fines, as you see here, both for the driver and for the company. And you can see here that the fines are higher for the company than for the individual driver. So $27.50 for the driver and up to $11,000 for the company. So there is some accountability there. So what about what's going on with this in the courts? There are actually multiple cases out there. This is just one example of a case where companies paid damages because their employee was on a cell phone and had an accident. And so back in 2007, this is actually Deborah Ford versus Vanessa C. McGrogan and International Paper Company. They paid $5.2 million settlement to a Georgia woman who was rear-ended by one of their employees that was driving a company car and talking on the company cell phone at the time of the accident. So this is just one. There are others that are lower and some that are higher than that. There is a doctrine called vicarious responsibility or vicarious liability, you may hear it called, where an employer can be held legally accountable for the negligent acts of employees during the course of employment. So it's clear, you know, now that employers can be found negligent if they fail to put a policy in place for safe use of cell phones. Okay, so what can a company do? Well, I'll tell you, my company, CNA, has a policy that cell phones and other such communication equipment is not to be used while operating a vehicle on company business or on company property. And as you see here, ExxonMobil and Shell have also put in place policies. I heard from about a 2010 National Safety Council survey of the Fortune 500 companies, and they had pretty good response. What they found is 1 in 5 of those that responded had instituted a policy banning cell phone use while driving. About 20% had total bans, which is something like over 2 million employees. About 22% of those with total bans said they experienced a decrease in crash rates and property damage. So that's a plus there. And this is an interesting finding that I didn't know until recently. In regards to productivity, we've talked about that. Only 7% of those that responded to the survey said that productivity decreased, and 19% actually said productivity increased. Now, I have my own ideas about that, but I thought that was an interesting finding. So if you don't have a written policy addressing distracted driving, you need one. Bottom line is you should consider a policy that will ban a person from using a cell phone, handheld or not, while driving on company business. And whatever your policy, it's got to be communicated to all drivers, and it's got to be enforced. As with any other policy, you want to have you want to enforce that cell phone policy equally among all employees, including managers and officers. So, you know, they say model the behavior you want to see, right? Well, that definitely holds true here. So what if you get a call while you're driving? You know, almost every cell phone provider has got a voice answering function as a part of their basic service. And, you know, if you got a passenger, allow them to answer. If you've got to answer the phone, as soon as you answer, tell that person to hold on while you find a safe place to park so you can talk. And when the call is completed, I think this is an important point that relates to something I said earlier. While you're still parked after you complete that call, if you got some important matters that you discussed, take a few minutes to write down some notes about that so you can essentially clear your head so you can focus 100% on your driving. Remember that those statistics that show increased accidents within 15 minutes after a cell phone call. So very important. And lastly, I would say, I would tell you the National Safety Council that I've referred to several times, they have a free cell phone policy kit that I would highly recommend that you obtain. It's very good, very well done. So you simply go to nsc.org and click on a link called Safety on the Road, the Safety on the Road link. And again, nsc.org. So and I'm getting toward the end of my discussion, but I wanted to pause here for a moment in case anyone wants to write down this website. This is the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. They've got a website that will give you current cell phone laws for each state. And so it's simply iihs.org. And so you can keep up to date if you work in multiple states or if you want to know if there's been any changes recently in the laws. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I hope you find this information helpful. It may be a good review for some of you on the line and just a confirmation of what you're already doing. Or maybe my hope would be is that you found some nuggets of information in here that you can take away and implement or improve your impact on safe driving. I would tell you this. What we have seen both with concrete contractors and really across the board is that rear-end collisions are far and away our number one type of motor vehicle accident that we are seeing. So reducing these driver distractions through education, and I know you folks are taking this back with you, hopefully you are, through legislation that gives us some accountability. And then lastly, I think most importantly, technology that's going to help us, get these numbers down. That technology is where we started with these phones and these cars. I think technology is going to be the answer to help us reduce the distractions. And so with that, Larissa might just open up the phone lines to see if there are any questions out there.
Thank you, and I'll begin the question and answer session. If you have a question, please press 0, then 1 on your touch-tone phone. If you wish to be removed from the queue, please press 0, then 2. If you're using a speakerphone, you may need to pick up the handset before pressing the numbers. Once again, if there are any questions, please press 0, then 1 on your touch-tone phone. Standing by for questions. And I am showing no questions.
Well, I'll give it a minute for those that may be thinking about a question to give you my contact information. Normally I like to put it on a slide, but I didn't do it this time. So if you have a follow-up question for me personally, my email address is simply Wayne, W-A-Y-N-E, .Kirkland, Kirkland, @cna.com. And so I would love to hear from you if you find this information helpful or these resources that I've referred to several times. These are great places to go and grab policy information as you have campaigns to roll out new policies in place. Very good information that is out there. So we'll pause one more minute here and see if there are any questions.
Once again, if you have a question, please press 0, then 1. And we have no questions.
Well, another thought would be is if you do have questions, obviously you can contact ASCC directly, and they certainly know how to get a hold of me. I want to end with this slide of several links of information that we were basing much of this presentation on. Very good information as you communicate in your own organizations. There are two websites that are not on this slide that I would add, and that is again nsc.org, and there's another site called distracteddriving.org, and both of these are supported by the National Safety Council and are very helpful. There are some individual states that also have web pages that have some very good information. Your departments of transportation, departments of public safety are usually a good resource. I know in the state, I'm based in Texas, and we have a very good resource here at the Department of Public Safety as well. So with that, thanks everyone for joining us. It's been a pleasure to be with us, and feel free to give me a call if you have any questions at all. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may now disconnect.